Well, I left college because I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and some of you know too, but some of you don't. Or maybe you thought you knew but are now questioning that choice. Maybe you're sitting there trying to figure out how to tell your parents that you want to be a doctor and not a comedy writer. Well, what you choose to do next is what we call in the movies the character-defining moment. Now, these are moments that you're very familiar with, like in the last Star Wars, The Force Awakens, when Rey realizes the Force is with her, or Indiana Jones choosing mission over fear by jumping into a pile of snakes. Now, in a 2-hour movie, you get a handful of character-defining moments, but in real life, you face them every day. Life is one strong, long string of character-defining moments. And I was lucky that at 18, I knew what I exactly wanted to do, but I didn't know who I was. How could I, and how could any of us? Because for the first 25 years of our lives, we are trained to listen to voices that are not our own. Parents and professors fill our heads with wisdom and information, and then employers and mentors take their place and explain how this world really works. And usually these voices of authority make sense, but sometimes doubt starts to creep into our heads and into our hearts. And even when we think that's not quite how I see the world, it's kind of easier just to nod in agreement and go along. And for a while, I let that going along define my character, because I was repressing my own point of view, because like in that Nilsson song, everybody was talking at me so I couldn't hear the echoes of my mind. And at first, the internal voice I needed to listen to was hardly audible, and it was hardly noticeable, kind of like me in high school. But then I started paying more attention, and my intuition kicked in. And I want to be clear that your intuition is different from your conscience. They work in tandem, but here's the distinction. Your conscience shouts, here's what you should do, while your intuition whispers, here's what you could do. Listen to that voice that tells you what you could do. Nothing will define your character more than that. Because once I turned to my intuition and I tuned into it, certain projects began to pull me into them, and others I turned away from.
It was a lot harder to get started when I was growing up and wanting to be a movie director, almost at 12 years old, because when I first picked up a camera, in order to get a...
Where were you living when you first...
I was in Scottsdale,
You were in Arizona?
You know, I was looking for a way to fulfill the requirements to get a photography merit badge. I was in the Boy Scouts of America. And the manual said... Did
you want to be a filmmaker before that?
No, I didn't want to be a filmmaker at all. I just wanted to be an Eagle Scout. That was my only aspiration, was want to get the highest rank I could in scouting. And so on my way to being an Eagle Scout, I had to get a certain, requisite amount of merit badges, and one of them I wanted to get was photography. And the requirement was to tell a story with still photographs. And my dad's camera broke. He did not have a still camera. Like the Brownie Kodak that he had wasn't working. So but he did have an 8mm Kodak 8mm movie camera, and I went to the Scoutmaster and I said, can we change the rules just so I can tell a story on film, because we don't have a still camera? And the Scoutmaster said, go ahead and do it. So I got 3 minutes worth of film, which is, by the way, all of those cameras used to take, these little 3-minute rolls of film. And I made this Western on a weekend. And I showed
how did you edit? Did you camera cut?
In camera cut, a little shot of my friends in cowboy outfits robbing a stagecoach, which was sort of an exhibit out front of a place called Pinnacle Peak Patio, a restaurant which is still there outside of Scottsdale.
So how did you know to camera cut?
I just figured out, you do a shot in this direction of the bad guys with their guns and masks on, and my sisters played the damsels in distress in the stagecoach, giving away their costume jewelry, well, my mother's jewelry. I didn't tell her we took my mom's jewelry to give away to 12-year-olds, pretending to be robbers. And I made this little movie and then showed it to the Boy Scout troop that weekend, and they all went crazy for it. They screamed and applauded, and I suddenly got bitten by that bug, and I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. It was became so clear to me. But it was hard then, because to make movies you had to pay for film and pay for developing of the film. So I had to go to my dad to say, Dad, I'll earn some money, but I can't earn all the money because I go to school. I can't get a job to earn the money to pay for all this equipment. So my dad helped me. However, today it's easier. Today, everybody seems to have a camcorder. Everybody has some high-8 digital camera. And it's a lot easier to get your hands on.
You can buy that editing program for the computer.
You can buy a software program for the computer and go out and make a movie and tell a story and figure out who you are as a storyteller. And so in a sense, it's easier today for young people to at least prove to themselves this is what they want to do for the rest of their lives, or at least in the interim of the rest of their lives. And it's also, if you get bitten by that bug, you can make a lot of little movies, and somehow those films will get seen by people, hopefully, that will hire you to do a music video someday, or a TV commercial, or a television show, or someday a feature film.
There's always been an emotional quotient in every film of yours. And is emotion close to you? And what is the deciding factor? Is business more important for you, or the emotional factor in a story?
No, the emotional factor in the story always trumps
Because you
business.
have been breaking the business barriers very often.
But what calls to me is not whether a film is going to make $1 gazillion. What calls to me is there a deep urge in the center of myself that only that film will release and then exorcise. And that's the only condition I'll direct a movie. If I'm doing a sequel, of course. If I'm doing The Lost World, A Secret of Jurassic Park, of course, I know that the bar's been raised, because if it doesn't make this X amount of money, everybody thinks it's a failure. And there's that added pressure of great expectation. The Indiana Jones series, they're not sequels, but on all the other 3 Indiana Jones films that I've directed, there's a tremendous level of expectation, and that's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But the fact that those movies are successful and make a lot of money isn't why I decided to direct sequels to the Indiana Jones series.
The one thing is, I am a cinemaniac, and I'm scared to death of the dark, except when in a motion picture theater. I love to see images, because I love images that tell stories. Before I ever knew how to read, I used to look at the Sunday funnies and still understand everything the storyteller wanted me to. And that's what I love to do more than anything else. I love to make pictures so I can look at them, so you could look at them, and so I can watch you looking at them, which is really, for me, the best part. If I had to single out one area to which I have an utter devotion, it would be with my preoccupation with the idea and the fight to still believe in the idea when so many others around you just don't get it, and the challenge of staying interested in one single idea for sometimes years, and the struggle not to contaminate that idea after months and years of obsessing over it. When I was in my early teens, I stayed up all night writing a screenplay and felt something to this day I swear I cannot get enough of. It was as close to the feeling of flying as I have ever had. You know what I mean when you're trying to get the words on paper and you're 3 thoughts ahead of yourself, and it's a race to get it all down before it goes back to wherever that stuff originally comes from. And it was called inspiration. And I actually made a movie from that script I wrote all night, and it was called Firelight. And it was truly an awful movie. But the process was what it was all about. The experience of that obsessive focus, of having an idea and actually being able to photograph it. That's been the magic potion for me ever since.
Envy is a good thing. You can't rise to any great height without not just envy, but it's because envy might be the wrong word. It's more jealousy and ambition and wanting to do better than those guys. And they all felt that way. We all felt that way about each other. But in trying to inspire each other and outdo each other, we worked together and collaborated with each other to make our films better. My movies are better for having Francis, George, and Marty, and Brian in my life. And I think some of their films are too.
I just think that people, when they go to a movie, shouldn't be given the entire meaning of the film in a nutshell.
You want to leave people guessing?
Not really guessing. They should come out satisfied that they've had an emotional experience and they've understood and liked all the people in the picture. But they should also go out of the movie thinking about the movie. Let the movie stick, to them like a musk. You can't get it off with soap and water. It just is on you for.
Stays with you.
Yeah, it's kind of like being skunked. In a good way.
You might have to explain being skunked to an Australian audience too.
Small furry creature, white stripe down the tail, sprays you, and you can't get it out of your clothes. You often have to burn your clothes because the after odor lingers for months, sometimes years, kind of like radioactive fallout.
So once you've got the smell, you're stuck with it.
In a nice way. I'm terrible with these analogies, but I kind of like to make movies that leave you with an impression that doesn't go away in 24 hours.
And the way you create a better future is by studying the past. Jurassic Park writer Michael Crichton, who graduated from both this college and this medical school, liked to quote a favorite professor of his who said that if you didn't know history, you didn't know anything. You were a leaf that didn't know it was part of a tree. So history majors, good choice. You're in great shape. Not in the job market, but culturally. The rest of us have to make a little effort. Social media that we're inundated and swarmed with is about the here and now. But I've been fighting inside my own family to get all my kids to look behind them, to look at what already has happened. Because to understand who they are is to understand who we were and who their grandparents were, and then what this country was like when they emigrated here. We are a nation of immigrants, at least for now. So to me, this means we all have to tell our own stories. We have so many stories to tell. Talk to your parents and your grandparents if you can, and ask them about their stories, and I promise you, like I have promised my kids, you will not be bored. And that's why I so often make movies based on real-life events. I look to history not to be didactic, because that's just a bonus, but I look because the past is filled with the greatest stories that have ever been told. Heroes and villains are not literary constructs, but they're at the heart of all history.
And I think it's okay that a first-time filmmaker, being so inspired by movies and music videos and any kind of music or media, can make a derivative film. It's okay that your first videos and your first attempts at telling a story are derivative, are obviously influenced by something that that you saw last week, and you want to kind of do a version. There's nothing wrong with learning the ABCs, learning your craft by being derivative, but at some point you're going to need to find your natural voice and find a way to give voice to who you are. And who you are, by the way, who you are is original. It just is, because you're not Tom, you're not me, and you're not your best friend, and you're not your teacher, you're not your parents. You are you. And because of that, you do have, every bone in your body is an original bone. It's sometimes trying to figure out how to express your own originality, and that sometimes takes a number of years to figure yourself out. It's not about camera magic.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm looking at student films or I'm looking at first-time directors' short films, I'm not looking for how great the camera is. I mean, so many people, I can look at any TV commercial and know that there are directors out there that can place a camera and sell a product, but can they tell a story that holds together and is compelling and original? And that's the secret. I'm more interested in a storyteller that doesn't know anything about where to put the camera than someone who knows everything about the camera but nothing about the story process.
When you have a dream, and the dream isn't something you dream and then it happens, the dream is something you never knew was going to come into your life. Dreams always come from behind you, not right between your eyes. It sneaks up on you. But when you have a dream, it doesn't often come at you screaming in your face, this is who you are. This is what you must be for the rest of your life. Sometimes a dream almost whispers. And I've always said to my kids, the hardest thing to listen to, your instincts, your human personal intuition, always whispers. It never shouts. It's very hard to hear. So you have to, every day of your lives, be ready to hear what whispers in your ear. It very rarely shouts. And if you can listen to the whisper, and if it tickles your heart,
and it's something you think you want to do for the rest of your life, then that is going to be what you do for the rest of your life, and we will benefit from everything you do.
Who I was. How could I, and how could any of us? Because for the first 25 years of our lives, we are trained to listen to voices that are not our own. Parents and professors fill our heads with wisdom and information, and then employers and mentors take their place and explain how the... Well, what you choose to do next is what we call in the movies the character-defining moment. Now, these are moments you're very familiar with, like in the last Star Wars, The Force Awakens, when Rey realizes the Force is with her, or Indiana Jones choosing mission over fear by jumping into a pile of snakes. Well, I left college because I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and some of you know too, but some of you don't. Or maybe you thought you knew but are now questioning that choice. Maybe you're sitting there trying to figure out how to tell your parents that you want to be a doctor and not a comedy writer. Now, in a 2-hour movie, you get a handful of character-defining moments, but in real life, you face them every day. Life is one strong, long string of character-defining moments. And I was lucky that at 18, I knew what I exactly wanted to do, but I didn't know this world really works. And usually these voices of authority make sense, but sometimes doubt starts to creep into our heads and into our hearts. And even when we think that's not quite how I see the world, it's kind of easier just to nod in agreement and go along. And for a while, I let that going along define